Hi everyone, welcome to Thriving with Sickle Cell. Today we're going to talk about marriage and sickle cell. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you. When looking for someone to marry, to have a long-term future with, to have children with, possibly to build a home with, business, family, all that, there are there are things to consider normally, obviously, but then there's other factors to consider when thinking about marriage. Some of the questions I thought a lot about during this time before I got married to my husband 5 years ago was, first of all, number one, after what's your name and are you Muslim, was what is your sickle cell status? I'm SS, I have sickle cell disease. And so my parents, it was very important to them right after I met my now husband, like about 2 weeks, 3 weeks after we met and started getting serious and wanted to talk for the sake of marriage. He My parents required him to, and I required him to get a blood test from his school health center. He had a blood test anywhere, any community health center, to confirm that he was AA, meaning that uh, he did not have sickle cell disease and he was not a sickle cell carrier. So that was very, very important. And for me, that was green light to, okay, let's continue to get to know each other and see if we, we would possibly work long term in a marriage. Um, to some people, that sounds ruthless and harsh. And, you know, I've had conversations with people with sickle cell who say that, if I love somebody and they have sickle cell disease, that's not a deal breaker. It was a deal breaker for me, 100%. This is a disease that I don't wish on my worst enemy. It's not a disease that I want to pass down in my lineage. Um, and I know that might be controversial to say, and that might hurt some people's feelings. It's just my own personal decision. And everybody has to look at themselves and think about what would work best for themselves and their own family. The other big issue when it comes to marriage is work, making money. Money makes the world go round. We all need it, right? So um, for me, I've always worked since I was 16 years old. I think the only time when I was 16, since I was 16, I didn't work was a few months my senior year of high school, and then my first year and a half of college, I didn't have a job. But besides that, I always worked in college as a babysitter, research assistant, and many other jobs. Eventually, also as a realtor, administrative assistant, and data entry, lab jobs, that kind of stuff. So I know that as someone with sickle cell, the kind of jobs I can do are that I would focus more on doing as someone with sickle cell disease is work from home jobs, computer work, corporate jobs. Um, that's what I was comfortable doing. And then my husband, he does works in IT. So when you're thinking about marriage, I feel like there should be an understanding of what kind of work you can do. Are you in a place where you can do that kind of job? Do you have like good enough internet? Or if you do work outside of the home, if you're not able to work from home, what kind of work are you able to do? Do you live in a place where you can do that? And then also talking about where to live. Do you live in a city that has good healthcare system? If you have sickle cell disease and you're going to the hospital regularly and you have to have very specialized care, maybe it's not best to live in the middle of the country, 4 hours from the closest airport or 4 hours from the closest specialist, So those are all lifestyle things you have to consider. And is the person you're deciding to partner with to marry, are they okay with that? You know, what if that person wants to live in the middle of nowhere in a different country that doesn't have great healthcare? So these are really important topics to talk about. So let's continue this conversation. When it comes to marriage on all fronts, disease aside, is about lifestyle, right? What kind of life do you want to have? No one can predict the future and all, but in thinking about what I want for myself, I always knew that I wanted to have children. So when I met my husband and we talked about life and what we'd want to do in life, I knew that having kids and having a family with children was very, very important to us. And living near either my parents or his parents, by near I mean like driving a day's drive away, for that support was very, very important to me. So in thinking about that, I didn't plan on being a stay-at-home mom per se, but I knew that if it came time to choose between working or having my children, just because I have sickle cell disease, that choice might have to be made at some point because I physically may not be able to do both, right? And that was a reality I thought of. And I really underestimated that. I really believed that I would work and have kids at the same time. But what I mean by this is that to be a stay-at-home mom, to be a housewife, right? It's kind of in the word. You need a husband to be a wife, right? It sounds stupid, but it's true. So it is, my husband always said from the beginning that it was his number one priority to financially provide for our family and be the breadwinner, the main income earner. So with that said, anything I do is a side thing, right? Whether I want to go to school or work later on when my kids are in school, depending on what kind of schooling they do. If it's not homeschooling or co-op or something like that, then I would be at home with the children, overseeing their education and overseeing just the care of them and our home. And that's what works for us. And everyone has opinions, but who cares? Who cares? We just have to do what works best for you, you know? And in your situation, it might be that the husband stays home and cares for the kids and looks over their education and the wife works, or there's a combination of both, or maybe both of you work part-time, whatever. But when it comes to this life and when it comes to living with sickle cell, you really have to just put your head down and do you, you know? Just do you. What works for your family? What works for your life? What works for your husband, your kids? It has to be between the two. It has to remain within those four walls because not everybody has all the variables and they don't need all the variables, right? And also, what works this year might not work next year, or what works today might not work in 3 years' time. It might not even work tomorrow. So it's just my husband and I, we have this, we're always in constant communication, constant collaboration of what are we doing next? What are our plans, our hopes and dreams, and who's taking on which responsibilities as it pertains to our family. So that is very, very important to have these kind of conversations and to have an understanding of roles and responsibilities. And also, another big point also is to consider life insurance, health insurance, and what does that look like? Does your spouse have a job that has good health insurance coverage? Do you work or do you work only to provide health insurance and the other one's job is for the main income of the family? What kind of jobs are available to you? Do you want to continue your education? How does that look like, you know? These are all general questions of life planning that you have to talk to your partner about anyways, your husband or wife about anyways. So the biggest, the biggest, the biggest determinant for how our marriage goes has been the decision to have children and how many children, right? Right now we have 2 kids. They're 3 and 2. Maybe in the future we'll have more. Only God knows. We'll see how that goes. People with sickle cell react very, very differently to pregnancy. I have a friend who she has a severe sickle cell SS, as I do. She has regular pain crises, 4 or 5 a year, but when she gets pregnant, she blossoms. I guess the hemoglobin F in the baby she doesn't get sick. She doesn't have pain crises. She doesn't even require much medication. Me, on the other hand, before I had children, I was hospitalized once or twice a year on good years, right? But once I got pregnant, pregnancy hit me like a load of bricks. I will not lie. I was like, people do this happily? I was really surprised by how much it took from me, physically, emotionally. It did a number on me, right? And it doesn't. And the thing is, you just can't know until you get pregnant. So when you are getting married, thinking about a lifelong partner, it's good to ask a lot of questions, visit doctors. You can have preliminary visits with OBGYN offices, with their nurse, with their PA, even sometimes with the doctor, and just kind of talk about what to expect if you are going to get pregnant with sickle cell disease, because your pregnancy is automatically a high risk pregnancy if you have sickle cell disease. I think even if you have sickle cell trait, but don't quote me on that. So if you know your pregnancy is going to be high risk, have these preliminary doctor's appointments. I went with my husband. We did with my now husband before we got married. I didn't go with him. I actually went to get my ovaries checked, and I had a consultation with my hematologist, my sickle cell doctor specifically, and she kind of walked me through what to expect, what could or could not happen, the things she's seen in her patients with sickle cell. Of course, when you're doing this, it's better to talk to a hematologist who sees a lot of pregnant sickle cell patients, because there are some who don't. Even though they see sickle cell patients, they don't really see a large population of people with sickle cell, so they might not really know in detail what to expect. So when you're planning your future, when I was planning my future with my husband, we planned for pregnancy, we planned for having children. And when I talk about plan for, I mean like we looked at insurance. What would the insurance cover? I kind of planned for the worst, and thankfully I did, because both of my pregnancies were hard. With my daughter, it was really breezy and good. I didn't get sick much, but once 5.5 months hit, once I was at the halfway point, past 20 weeks, yeah, I got sick a lot. I was in the hospital every single month after 5 months for 7 days plus. There was a time period I was in the hospital for 1 month, yeah, a full 30 days. So that was interesting. With my son, same thing happened. But with my son, the minute I got pregnant, after 8 weeks, I was in the hospital every single month. That was really hard. So thankfully, we had health insurance during that time. And thankfully, I wasn't the main income earner. I stopped working after I had my daughter, but I was working in the beginning when I was pregnant. And even towards the end of my pregnancy, I was still working. But thankfully, my health insurance was not tied to me working. Our health insurance wasn't tied to me working. So those are things you really have to think about. Health insurance coverage, who's earning the money. If you, as a person with sickle cells, is earning the money, how can you continue to do so if you are sick? Is there a plan for that? Do you have some savings? Like what's going to happen, Because some people have amazing pregnancies that, of course, every pregnancy has its difficulties, but some people don't get sick as much and they are okay during pregnancy, while other women I've met with sickle cell disease, like myself, have really rough pregnancies that kind of inflames their sickle cell and makes it a lot worse. So those are big things to think about when trying to plan your life and thinking about marriage and sickle cell disease. And then after the kid is born, yay! So there is a period of recovery that you may go through. Right after each of my pregnancies, I had very bad pain crises. My daughter, with my first pregnancy, the pain crisis lasted for 10 days. I was in the hospital for 10 days. And then discharged with my son, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks or so. Yeah. So, again, thankfully, my husband had paternity leave. We had my mom came to stay with us for a few months. And then after that, my mother-in-law came to stay, and then my sister-in-laws came to stay. So we had a lot of support that was planned out ahead of time. And just by the grace of God, it just all worked out. So by the time the last person left, I was fully recovered. My house was filled with food that was cooked. I was really pampered and spoiled. If you don't have that support system, are there things you can do now to build that support system, to build that network? Can you pay for a cleaner to come to your house once a month? Can you afford certain services? Can you do trades with a friend? If you know how to sew, can you trade sewing for some other services, or for some food, or what can you control within your own hands? What can you do to facilitate your time, your pregnancy period, and your recovery period after pregnancy? And obviously, your husband will be a huge part of this, or your wife will be a huge part of this whole process. So these are some things to be aware of, some things to think about when family planning, when thinking about family planning and marriage with sickle cell disease or any kind of chronic pain. Take care, stay blessed, have a beautiful, beautiful day. Bye.